What's going on, guys? Billy here, and recently I picked up the DJI Smart Controller to accompany my Mavic 2 Pro. Now I know that I'm really late to the party here as this remote came out a little over a year and a half ago, but truth be told, in the backpack I carry around with me everywhere that holds my Mavic 2 Pro, it just didn't accompany any more space for a larger remote. I had that thing packed so precisely. So I just bit the bullet. I continued to use the standard Mavic 2 remote controller with basically whatever iPhone I had in my pocket at the time to fly my Mavic 2, both the Pro and the Zoom. And with that came a lot of interruptions during flight from phone calls and notifications, my battery constantly dying a lot faster than I wanted to, and also the screen brightness going down even more as I continued to use the phone because it would continue to get hotter and hotter, which happened pretty often. Because of those problems that I dealt with on a daily basis and more, I ended up ditching the standard remote controller for the more premium smart controller, and I have to say it has changed the way that I fly in every single way. It seriously improved my workflow from the ground up. So with that said, I want to go through what makes a smart controller so great and why I think it's a great buy here still in the middle of 2020. So there are two things right off of the bat that need to be addressed about the smart controller. The first is the cost, and the second is about just how long this has been available on the market for us to buy. So the price tag of the smart controller is a whopping $749. Yes, that is no easy cost to stomach, especially for something that is just an add-on, something that is about half the cost of what a Mavic 2 Pro is, and it's almost the full cost of what a Mavic Air 2 is, both drones that already come with great remote controllers. So I hope that by the end of this video, I can help you guys understand exactly why it's worth the cost for somebody that considers themselves a professional or somebody that considers themselves as a very dedicated flyer that uses their drone every single day, both on a professional and non-professional basis. Now, transitioning over to how long this has been on the market for, a year and a half. As you guys know, a year and a half is a long time when we start speaking about technology. When it comes to like the iPhone, for example, right? There's good times to buy and there's bad times to buy. Like we all know that the end of August, early September is not a good time to buy an iPhone. Like a brand new one is right around the corner. But when it comes to DJI, they aren't on a set release schedule. Like you don't know when a brand new product from them is coming because they don't have a product cycle for their drones or for their peripherals. For example, a drone's lifespan might be 2 to 3 years with DJI, but their higher end accessories, their peripherals, on the other hand, don't see updates nearly as often. Take the DJI goggles, for example. They haven't been updated since they first came out in early 2017, besides the different iterations that are dedicated to FPV. The remote used for the Mavic was also in commission for a very long time and was just recently switched up here with the release of the Mavic Air 2. Now, with all of these signs, I would say that even a year and a half after the smart controller dropped, it is still a safe buy here because the chances of them updating it point to being low. A final thing I want to mention to wrap up my point here is that the M300 that DJI just released uses a special version of the smart controller with relatively the same design, and these enterprise class drones typically stay in service for much longer and don't get updated nearly as often as consumer drones do. DJI wouldn't have used this remote design if they plan on scrapping it in the coming months. So now that my lengthy explanation of pricing and timing is finally over, I now want to cover how the smart controller has been such a game changer since it's entered my workflow. Now I know that I've preached about how this is a fairly older piece of technology, but you could have told me that the smart controller came out a couple of weeks ago, maybe a little over a month ago, and I would believe you because this is still such a premium remote controller. It still feels like it's brand new. It's really light years ahead of what any other manufacturer is offering for their drones in terms of premium remote controllers. So the first thing that stood out to me is just how well the remote is built. There's no shortage of premium materials on the remote with the rubberized grips, the tactile buttons, the high quality plastic, and a general top-notch build quality with no bending, bowing, or creaking. You can tell right off the bat that you are getting what you pay for just from the build quality and the feel of this remote controller. This is generally the case with basically any remote controller that DJI has manufactured for their lines, like the Phantom, the Inspire, and the Mavic. They all are just top-notch, and not only do the buttons feel good, not only do they feel like they're made well, but the input is so smooth and so precise. Like not only do the sticks feel really smooth when you move them around, but it translates into really good flying. Like the reason that DJI drones fly so well is not only because of their software, but it's because the remote controllers are so good. You could have a great drone with long flight time with a great camera, like the Autel Evo 2, but you could have a bad remote controller like the Autel Evo 2, and the experience is kind of hindered, right? Now, there are a few things I would change about the design of the smart controller here. The first of which is the stick placement when you're storing them, right? You have to lift up the antenna and then grab them from the back, and then you push the antenna back down. Now, I do think that this is a pretty clever spot to hide them, because as you put them in here, it's a little bit of a struggle. As you fit them in the back here, you can simply hide them by pushing the antenna down. But in my opinion, I like what DJI did with the Mavic Air 2 remote. They stored it in the bottom so that once I get my mobile device in, I can just grab them from the bottom. There's really no hassle. They fit right in. That's a good spot in my opinion, but I understand that DJI is limited here because of the screen. The screen comes to almost the very bottom of the remote here. And as we kind of talk about that screen, I wish it was on the top of the remote controller, because of course I kind of feel like I'm hunching over to see the actual screen itself. I feel like sometimes my thumbs can get in the way of that screen, but I feel like they were making use of the space they had here, because if they put the screen on top, then they'd have to put some sort of area underneath of the remote to actually grab onto, and this remote would end up probably being a little bit bigger. Now, speaking of that screen, that is pretty much the biggest difference here between the standard Mavic 2 controller and the smart controller. This is essentially an Android-based tablet that DJI has built into the bottom of the remote controller, making this a standalone device. You can connect it to Wi-Fi, you can browse the internet, and you can do other things that you'd expect from an Android-based device. Now, hold on, before I get ahead of myself here, it isn't a true Android device. It's not like an unlocked Android tablet. You can't go and add a SIM card to make phone calls. You can't go and send text messages. No, DJI limits you here with the experience that they want you to have, because it's got preloaded software, and unless you hack it, you're pretty much stuck with what they want you to do with the smart controller. So with that, there's no Play Store, there's no third-party app store, so you can't download Drone Deploy, you can't download Pix4D, you can't use a smart controller to effectively map out an area. And that's something that is a big portion of my business, meaning that along with the smart controller, I carry around my regular Mavic 2 controller in case I've got to do a mapping job during the day. So I've had to upgrade my backpack. I've now got the 30-liter peak design instead of the 20-liter, and I carry around both remote controllers. And this is something that's kind of a deal breaker to me, the fact that this remote controller is so limited, right? That means that if you want this remote to work with, say, the Mavic Air 2, you've got to get the DJI Fly application on here, and they haven't released it for it yet. You can't go and just download it off the App Store. You've got to wait until it becomes compatible. Now look, I understand why they limit you. I understand why they put these limitations in place, but I wish they weren't so limiting, because again, the smart controller could be so much more powerful than it actually is, and that goes for their Crystal Sky tablet too, the ultra bright tablet. If that wasn't so restricted, it could be so much better than it actually is. I should probably mention though that this really won't affect every single person looking to buy the smart controller. Like, I guarantee you, a lot of people watching this video could care less about mapping with their drone and they just want to fly it, in which case a smart controller is great for you because it's got the DJI Go 4 app pre-installed, and that's probably all you need access to. Okay, rant over. Moving on here, back to the screen itself. The peak brightness is 1000 nits, and the panel itself outputs 1080p video at 5.5 inches. This means that even in the brightest sunlight, you're able to focus on the shot that you're getting without the sun overpowering the brightness of the screen. I usually turn off the auto brightness feature and keep it cranked fully maxed out to 100% at all times, and I never notice the screen dimming due to heat or anything like that. The built-in fan in the back really does a good job at monitoring the temperature of the device and keeping it cool. So having that built-in screen for the bright panel is definitely a plus. It's definitely something that is leaps and bounds better over what I was using in the iPhone. Apple doesn't typically put the brightest panels inside of their phones. I always struggle with that, and I know that there's a ton of Samsung fans down there in the comment sections that are going to tell me just how bright their phone gets to. But I would venture to say that the added benefit of having a built-in screen is setup time, right? So with the Mavic 2 Pro remote controller or the Mavic 2 Zoom remote controller, you've got to unfold it, you've got to put the sticks in, you've got to fidget with your phone, get it in the clamp, open up the application, turn your phone to do not disturb mode, you've got to unlock your phone before all that works, and typically the Face ID or the facial recognition doesn't really work all that well because the little lip blocks it. There's a lot of setup that gets involved with this small remote controller, but with the smart controller, it's flipping out the antennas, putting in the sticks, and turning it on. It is so much faster, and it makes all the difference, especially if you're breaking your drone down and then setting it back up multiple times in a day. Sometimes I've got to do that 3 or 4 times at different locations, and it makes all the difference. Now, because of that built-in screen, it's not all sunflowers and dandelions. It's definitely not the best thing to do, especially with me turning auto brightness off, because the battery in this device, it's it's not good. They say that it has a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. On their website, they tout that it's got great battery life, but I find that per flight, I drain anywhere between 12 to 15% battery in the smart controller, meaning what? I can get like 8, 9, maybe 10 flights if I'm lucky off of one charge. And typically with the Mavic 2 remote, I can get like 30 or 40. So it's a big jump. It's a big difference coming from that remote controller. But the good thing is it's got a built-in USB-C port here at the bottom so that you can charge and fly very easily at the same time. On the topic of ports, a benefit to having this remote is the added I/O on the back, which include a full-sized USB-A port, a micro SD card slot, and a full-sized HDMI port. From viewing files on the go to saving a backup while you're flying to sharing your flight on another screen simultaneously, this diverse selection of ports really gives the power user the option to do a lot more while on the go right from their remote controller than the standard remote controller offers. So up until this point, we've only really focused on the hardware of the smart controller, which is definitely where it shines. It's definitely its strong suit, but it's got some pretty cool features built into the software experience, like the ability to change between which drone you're controlling on the fly. After you link a drone, it'll be added to the aircraft management section in the remote, and it stays there ready to pair unless you connect it to another remote controller. There's also a feature called DJI Go Share built into the remote that allows you to send photos and videos from your smart controller to your mobile device within the DJI Go app, but I don't necessarily use this that often because I can just plug my SD card into my phone and access all the files and open it up in any app that I want to. So it's not something that I'm saying is a bad function to have because it's great to use in a pinch, but it's not something that I use all of the time. So I think that pretty much wraps up everything I've got to say about the smart controller. I guess you could consider this to be my first impressions video of this device a year and a half after it dropped. I finally got it and it has vastly improved my workflow across the board. Now, as I've said, it does have its drawbacks, right? The not so good battery life, although you can overcome that with a portable charger or just by plugging it into an outlet or something like that. Also, the software limitations, although that won't affect everybody, there's a small percentage of people that actually map with their drone. And if you just fly your drone, the limitations aren't going to be that restrictive. And the price. I know there's a lot of people that are going to hesitate at $749. They're going to balk at the price, but I think it's worth every penny. The outstanding build quality, the convenience of having a dedicated flying device, all the software features that I said about DJI Go Share and the ability to kind of have that fleet management system to bounce back and forth between different drones. And I think the biggest thing for me is just the fact that now it makes my setup time a lot easier. And again, I've got that dedicated screen. I don't have to deal with phone calls, text messages, notifications in general bothering me. Of course, that I could just turn on do not disturb mode on my phone and save $750, but then I've got to also deal with my battery dying a lot faster than I would want it to, and I've also got to deal with the not so bright screen. Again, the Samsung fans are going to light me up in the comment section, but regardless, having a true dedicated device to something that I fly every single day, it's something that I'd easily, gladly spend the money on to vastly improve my workflow, as I've already shared with you guys. Now, I know that there's going to be a question. You guys are going to ask, can I use this with the Mavic Air 2? At the current time of filming this video, no. This only supports the DJI Go application. It doesn't have support for the DJI Fly application, which is what the Mavic Air 2 uses. Now, DJI has said that they're going to come out with a firmware update for the smart controller that'll add DJI Fly app support. I'm saying DJI way too much, but you are going to be able to fly the Mavic Air 2 with this in the future. This uses OcuSync. The Mavic Air 2 has got OcuSync. It's just kind of a no-brainer. What I'm interested to see is if you can fly the Mavic Mini using the smart controller because you now have the DJI Fly application. Regardless, the smart controller is like a glorified universal remote controller for DJI products, and I like that. It's cool because I think that in the future, if you just have one remote controller and you can like just buy the drone, I don't know, that could be a pretty cool point. DJI, if you're watching, that'd be pretty awesome. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think of the smart controller down in the comment section below, and as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.